Good evening everybody and welcome to Macron Firma's welding tutorial. I'll just run through things that you need. PP, you've steel toe cap boots, non-flammable overalls, goggles that will protect your eyes, welding gloves, wire brush, pliers or vice grip, chipping hammer, a welding shield with a shade of glass 10 or 11. You can have a manual one like this one, or you can have an electronic one like this one with the settings on the side, and just be sure you turn it off grind when you are going welding to either 10 or 11 there on the side. Obviously you'll need a welder as well, so this is an inverter welder and it has two leads coming off of it. You have your earthing clamp, you have your electrode holder. Also you will need electrodes or welding rods as they're more commonly known as. You'll have a 3.2, which is a heavier one, or you have a 2.5. So as you can see there are two different sizes and you'll burn them at different
So
to discuss the flat weld, so this is a plate that I did before, and as you can see there's a nice wave and nice smooth weld. So I would have started at this end of the plate with my rod at 45 degrees to the 90 degree angle. So 45 like that, and then lean it back to 30 degrees. And then just pull it nice and slowly, and the full length of the rod on an 8-inch length of plate should go about maybe 4 inches. So it'll bring you maybe halfway on the plate. And obviously as you're welding, the rod will burn up along and disappear. So when you get to the middle, then after you're burning your first rod, you change your rod and you'll start off just where you finished the last run of weld and continue on with the second rod, and you'll be left with a nice smooth, slightly waved weld. To move on to the second line of weld, then you will start at the same end as you started at the start. Same angles again apply, but you cover, like you can see here, half the weld and half of the plate, and you pull that weld 2/3 of the way. And then when you have the second weld done, go on to your third weld, and that covers the other half of the weld, and that goes 2/3 more or less at the same angle again as you started with the first run. You'll have a flux left after each run of weld. This flux needs to be removed with your chipping hammer and give it a clean off with a wire brush so that you have clean steel at all times when you're welding to get a nice smooth finish. The flux, which is on the outer edge of the welding rod, removes any impurities and keeps the weld cool and prevents oxidization also while you're welding.
And you're on.
Right. Just for the flat weld, I have my electrode in the electrode holder now. By just opening the clamp part and slipping it in like that. and making sure that it's good and firm. This is my earth clamp, which is placed on like that, and just make sure there's good connection. Now for starting the weld. For starting the weld, you'll have your ampage set at roughly maybe around 120 for the 3.2 rod, and you'll have your two pieces of steel, nice and clean as you can see here, and you'll just place it like that. Just put on my gloves now first. So when you're tacking the two plates together, just place your hand like that to hold it in place, and just literally touch the end of the electrode on the end of the steel, like so. And then just make sure it is in line, because when you are welding, the heat can distort the metal and pull it slightly, and then spot at this end as well. As you can see, it's a 90-degree angle in here, nice and straight, and if it is out of line, you can just give it a small little tap with the hammer to straighten it back in line again, just off eye. So when you're doing your first run, you'll keep your heat, your amps up a small bit higher, so just at around 120. And just put your rod here at 45 degrees, angled back at 30, and weld like so. Change the rod. And just start again where you literally pulled up the rod from when you ran out of the first rod. Now, as you can see, we have a nice smooth weld. That was the flux that I just removed there, and just give it a tiny tear of the wire brush just to shine it off for your second run. And as you can see, there's a nice waved motion in it, and just it's nicely positioned within your angle there. It's roughly halfways up the upright plate and halfways out the flat plate on the bottom. So just for your second run, I'll place the rod just roughly halfway between the first weld and the bottom plate, and I'll adjust the welder amps down to maybe 118, as there is heat now in the plate from the first run, and it'll help with applying the weld and get a nice even weld again. And for this second weld, I'll be only coming up 2/3 of the plate. And you can see the way that the flux is rising. This demonstrates that I had my angles correct and that it is a nice even weld all the way along. It'll just flick off nicely. Just come along with your wire brush again and just clean off the weld again. For your third and final run, I'll keep the end of the rod on top of my second weld, cover roughly half of that weld, cover half of my second weld, and bring it up along this plate as well, the upright plate. And that weld goes approximately 1/3 of the length of the plate. Okay, and as you can see, the flux is rising nicely off of the weld. Just give it one bit of a clean, and as you can see, there's a nice weaved motion the whole way along. So just bring it along slowly like this, and that's the way your weld should turn out. And as well, if you have your angles right and your ampages set correctly, you will have minimal splatter as well, which are these little guys here. There should be very little of those present on the plate. Okay, just for your upright weld, or your vertical up as it's known as well, I normally use a 2.5 for your first run or your first route, which is the more upper weld here, your first run. I've obviously started at the bottom, so you put your rod in towards the 90-degree angle and you have it at 45, and then lean it back down to 45 as well, because you're traveling upwards up the metal. So then we'll say coming back up to here now where the first run is, you can see it's over and back, over and back, over and back. And when you get out to either side, just leave the rod there for like half a second, just for it to connect to the metal, as will be demonstrated in an actual live demonstration in a minute. So that'll be your first run, and then I normally go on to a 3.2 rod then, which is your heavier rod, and just start at the bottom again, and your temperatures will come down a small bit because there is heat already in the plate. And again, you'll come in at 45 degrees and lean it down to another 45. And you'll have your uphand weld again, so it'll be over and back, over and back, over and back, all the way up roughly about maybe halfways up the plate, just to expose your first run, and you'll have your second run then as well exposed as well. Okay. Just for the for your upright welding, for the actual weld now itself, I have my 2.5 rod in the holder, and I have my welder set at roughly around 75 or 76 amps, or 74 as displayed. And I will just I'll kneel down for this and roughly just put your rod at the end of the plate, 45 degrees and down at 45. Okay, you can rise it up a small bit if it's more comfortable on your hand, and as you rise up along the plate, that's the way you take your weld. Okay, so you'll start either left or right and just weave over and back, nice and gently, all the way up. You'll probably use 3 rods in the length of the plate, approximately, just depending on how fast you're traveling with the weld. But it's a slower type weld for the upright, and just leave a small little pool build when you go to either side, just to allow the weld to fill up. Okay, so I'll start welding up. You can see that how it's changing now.
Yeah. Hang on.
Just changing the rod now again, and you can go back in immediately without chipping any slag, because the centre of the weld where you stopped will be still hot now. That's my first run done, the first route, so I'll just tap off the flux. Keep in mind now that I haven't welded upright in a good few months, so there might be a few potholes along the way, but that's what it's all about. Practice makes perfect. And the beauty about the second run is that you can cover up them little potholes. So I suppose just now that I do have defects to show you, slag inclusion, that was where I started off my second run, or my second rod on my first route. Another small bit of slag inclusion there.
There's blinding, yeah. Keep doing so.
and just I obviously didn't hold it at the right angle up along here. So look, these things happen, but for the next run now, I'll come up about halfway up the plate, and that's what you'd do for the for your regional round or the national final. Okay, just for my second route run, I have my 3.2 rod in now, which is the heavier one, and I'll turn the ampage up slightly because it's a heavier rod. If I was staying with my 2.5s, I'd be probably dropping it back slightly, but I weld with a 3.2. So I will turn it up slightly to help burn the rod and have enough heat. So I'll turn it up to about 85. Okay, might go a small bit more actually. 88. So I'll just take the same angles again, and you start at the bottom of the plate and work up, weaving over and back all the time. And just when you get out to either side, just leave it for for half a second, just to leave the weld fill up. Bring it over to the other side, leave it fill up again, and over and back, just to get your weaving motion. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to change the rod now. Approximately, it'd probably take maybe 2.5 rods to complete your second run. Okay, we're nearly far enough. So that run of welds turned out nicer. Just taking off the flux now. And just with your wire brush, just give it a clean down. And always remember that these plates are piping hot. So have a source of water close by to cool them down in. Don't ever go to catch the plates with your gloves, because even the gloves wouldn't protect you from the heat that is created there. So as you can see, there's a nice weaved motion. Not absolutely perfect, but for a weld upright, it isn't bad. I only did one run of practice before this, so I'm happy enough with that. When you bring the rod out here to the end, you just leave it for half a second just to allow the weld to fill up, and it'll run back towards the center as you just saw in the video. So yeah, that's the That's the second run of the upright weld. Okay. Always be sure to remove flammable items from your area of welding. Also, just to run through what the other main part of the welding competition is, that there is a theory side. Normally consists of maybe about 10 questions, and you can get a sample of these questions from head office, just so that you know what is coming up. We'll say, just for example, one question is there's numbers written on the welding rod, and it would be to describe what those numbers stand for. 6013. Yeah, basically that's my tutorial on the welding of Macron and Firma. It is kindly sponsored by Griffin Welding in Middleton in Cork, Griffin Engineering and Welding Supplies, and yeah, that's about it. Tutorial. Just a small bit of background info on myself, I suppose. I am no way qualified as a welder. I did a night course, alright, about 10 years ago, while I was attending college, and I suppose that's kind of my extent of my welding training, I suppose. I have partook in the Macron from welding competition at a regional basis for, I suppose, 10 years maybe, and I've partook in the national final 3 times. I suppose the saying goes, third time lucky. So look, perseverance and practice makes perfect are 2 key pieces of advice I would give anyone to partaking in the welding competition. I suppose, look, the welding competition itself is a lovely competition that, you know, it's your own self that does the competition, and you're not, you know, you're not depending on other people to partake with you. It's kind of on your own back, and I suppose that's what I liked about it. I am the current national winner, and I just love welding, I suppose. Tis lovely to be able to produce a nice, clean, smooth weld, I would think, to myself anyway. So yeah, that look, as I said, I'm not a professional in the whole thing, but I have learnt, I suppose, different tips and tricks along the way, and I would put a lot of that down to Macron and Firma and the welding competition itself. Only for Macron and Firma, I suppose, having the 2 different types of weld, your flat weld or your horizontal weld, and your vertical weld, I would have never really pushed myself to learn the vertical weld, because I suppose when I'm here at home welding on the farm, I always, you know, tend to turn things on their flat, or, you know, to be able to do the flat weld. So because it's an easier weld, and I suppose you've more control over it. But yeah, look, practice makes perfect in these cases. And as they say, if you don't succeed at first, try again. Just to finish up, there's 2 people I'd like to thank. Tomas Cuff for providing the venue and the electricity, and Mr. John Casey for the camera work, and both of them have taken part in the welding competition itself, so they know what's involved. And John was a winner in the past as well. So I'd like to thank both of them for the help tonight, and also I would like to thank the competitions committee for asking me to do the tutorial, and yeah, that's it. So I wish the best of luck to anybody that partakes in the competition, and yeah, if you want any advice or anything, don't ask me. Thank you.